Welcome back to Through the Big Book with Dr. Ben. My name is Ben and I'm an alcoholic. This will be part 4 of There's a Solution. We're on page 25, the very final paragraph. It says, if you are seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible, and if we'd passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other to accept spiritual help. Blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation, that's pretty incredible. When I relapsed after having a number of years of sobriety, I didn't seem to be able to get drunk enough or high enough. You've got to get extra drunk and extra high or whatever, however it is you're going about it. Since we're talking about Alcoholics Anonymous, we'll just stick with drunk. I had to get extra drunk to get drunk enough to not think about all this AA I had in my head. It's different once you've been in here for a while and you've got some AA in your head, because now you know. Now you know what you're doing is wrong, and you know that there's a solution at your fingertips. All you got to do is just show up. And so to blot out the consciousness of knowing all that stuff the best you can requires a whole heck of a lot more intoxicants from my experience, to near fatal dosages. I'm lucky I'm alive. That is the truth. Or accept spiritual help. Now, as you heard in the last one, talking about a concept of a power greater than ourselves is a lot for people's egos to digest, because then it doesn't mean that, well, now Captain Important isn't in charge anymore. It means some mysterious something is, or whatever. And now I can't be, Mr. Superstar, Mr. Ultra, or Mrs. whatever your thing is, intelligent superstar that just handles life and just dazzles everybody with my awesomeness. That means I'm going to have to be humble possibly and practice some humility. No, why would an alcoholic need that? Says this, we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort. So it says a certain American businessman, and this guy's name's Roland Hazard. You can look him up if you want. I'm not going to spend any time talking about it. We'll just say that he had access to the best care in the world at that time. He says good sense and high character. For years he floundered from one sanitarium to another. He consulted the best-known American psychiatrist. Then he'd gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, Dr. Jung, who prescribed for him. Again, whole heck of a lot of content we can talk about on Dr. Jung alone. Whole body of scientific papers and books and all kinds of theories that Jung was responsible for contributing to the world. But you can look those up on your own. It says, though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired such profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. So my understanding is he was over there for a long time and got drunk on the boat ride home after spending all this time and all this money on the fanciest, mind doctor, if you will, at that time. Got the best care in the world, and then gets drunk on the boat ride home. It says, so he returns to this doctor whom he had admired and asked him point blank why he couldn't recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. Well, yeah, all of us do. All alcoholics want to regain self-control over this alcohol stuff and just to be able to not drink. That's, of course. It says he seemed quite rational and balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he'd have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was a great physician's opinion. And that's tough to hear prognosis like that. Obviously, we still have prognoses that are horrible in the medical, that you get from a doctor, because doctors can't do everything. They can't cure everything. They can't fix it all. Can only do what we can do. And at the time, they didn't have AA. They had similar things, as you can read about, but they didn't have AA. And so, what are you going to do? It says, but this man still lives and is a free man. He doesn't need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men may go, without disaster, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. Some of our alcoholic readers, and about the certain simple attitude, we'll talk about that a lot in step 10 and step 11. So some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with this doctor. The doctor said, "You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where the state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you." Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He said to the doctor, "Is there no exception?" "Yes," replied the doctor, "there is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences." What is that? It says, "To me, these occurrences are a phenomenon. They appear to be in the nature of," start definition. So vital spiritual experience is huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Wow, that's not at all what I was expecting. Huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Something tells me we're going to learn more about that. So continuing on definition. An example of that is ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. Pretty amazing. It's just that simple. That's, like we talked about in the last episode, that's the vital spiritual experience. Huge emotional displacement and rearrangement. So then it says, "In fact, I've been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I've never been successful with an alcoholic of your description." Another asterisk there for seeing the appendix. They're really trying to make sure that we go back there and read that, which we did in the last episode. So it says, "Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctor's telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience." Here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience which, as we've already told you, made him a free man. So we, in our turn, sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. So how bad do you want this? Do you want to stay sober as much as you want air whenever you're drowning? Because that's kind of what it takes. There are so many people that don't get to keep this, that relapse and that I've seen die. And it's not because they didn't want it. I mean, they had to seek the escape as they would if they were looking for oxygen when they were drowning. This thing takes some pretty serious work in the early days, and it's not fun. But it says, "What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God." Wow. Okay. So it's not saying a doorknob. Now, if that's your first time to hear that, or not your first time, I'm sorry, but if it's your first time, there are people that say you can use the doorknob. And it's just a funny example, right? They're saying that you can use any concept of a higher power that you want, which is one of the fantastic things about Alcoholics Anonymous. We don't care what you call God or what your concept is. It does not matter, including if you want to worship a doorknob. So it's kind of a joke to just say like how open-minded we are. But obviously, you want to set the bar pretty high, right? You're talking about God here. You're talking about you know what I'm saying? Like, let's reach a little higher than this. And just to give an example, I worked with somebody before who was living on the streets and was having a really hard time with this higher power thing, and identified with a higher power that most people would find very, very, very scary and against everything they believe, right? Exactly what you're thinking about. That's who this guy's wanting to worship. And my response was, is it yourself? You said, no. But you could blah, 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 blah. I said, well, listen, as long as it's not you, I don't care if you worship blah. It doesn't matter. I don't care. No one else cares. They might ruffle some feathers, but you know what? It's good for them. It's good for them to feel a little disturbed so they can take something to their sponsor and work through that too. Because it doesn't matter. As long as it isn't you, that's a great higher power. I would also encourage you to consider not worshiping other people. That's just my 2 cents. I wouldn't worship a sponsor or your wife or your kids or your dad or anything like that. Let's move the bar up a little bit, you know? So it says, a new life has been given to us, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works. Now that's this whole program. This is a design for living. It's more than just not drinking today. It's about learning how to live and live in life, and not just be in a rehab for 6 months, but to go out into the world and live and stay sober with all the trials and tribulations and challenges and etc. that come along with just living life. Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me how to live my life with just a whole new way of living. It just never stops. So let's keep going here. Let's wrap this up. It says, the distinguished American psychologist William James, in his book Varieties of this Religious Experience, indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God. We have no desire to convince anyone that there's only one way by which faith can be acquired. If what we've learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are the children of a living creator with whom we may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms as soon as we're willing and honest enough to try. Now again, I got to pause to remind you, this book was written in 1939. I don't know if you remember what was happening in 1939. There's a good chance you were not alive then. But just a quick, just Google Europe or anything in 1939. Some of the wars that were going on, and some of the social things that were going on, even in America. We were not talking about complete all-inclusivity. There was a genocide going on. There were racial things that were horrible stuff. And so to talk like this and say that, that God is accessible, our Creator is accessible to everybody. I don't care if you're purple or green or black or brown or white or yellow or red or magenta or hot fuchsia or tangerine. No, it does not matter. Or creed, or race, any of this stuff. We all get to come to God. God wants us all, according to what we're reading here, as soon as we're willing and honest enough to try. So by you just being here, In my humble opinion, if you've made it to page 28, you're pretty darn willing. Now all we have to do is just be honest with ourselves and set our ego aside and say, yeah, I'll give this thing a shot. Even if it's an attitude of defeat, and you're just like, whatever, what else can I do? That is fine too. There's no wrong way to do it as long as we're just going about it and moving forward. So it says, those who have religious affiliations will find here nothing disturbing to our beliefs or ceremonies. And that's been true. I've sponsored a lot of very religious people, and all this stuff it's just like left hand, right hand. They just come together perfectly. It's a beautiful thing, and they're very complementary of each other and synergistic, if you will. There's no friction among us over such matters. It says, we think it's no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify themselves with as individuals. It should be an entirely personal affair which each one decides for himself in the light of past associations or his present choice. Not all of us join religious bodies, but most of us favor such memberships. Now, religious stuff really gets people all in a thing. Everybody has some kind of experience with religion, and a lot of people that I've worked with have had very bad experiences, and they're like vehemently opposed to, I will not do that. They do this, and they're stupid, and nothing makes sense, and blah, blah, blah. That's fine, dude. Do it. Do not. You don't have to go. You don't have to do any of that. Just take a breath. It's okay. We're talking about religion, but I'm not trying to sell you a bill of goods here, and I'm not trying to convert you to something. It's just an option. And if you do pursue religion, you're going to find a whole lot of the very similar concepts in your religion as you will in this. And a lot of things might make sense that maybe never quite did, and you'll see things from a new perspective. It says, in the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it. Then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many who were once in this class are now among our members. Surprisingly enough, we find such convictions no great obstacle to a spiritual experience. Further on, clear-cut directions, truly clear-cut, are given showing how we recovered. These are followed by 42 personal experiences. Each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. That's everything post 164, including Dr. Bob's nightmare. Everything back there has to do with exactly that, what we just read. In their own language and from their own point of view, how they established a relationship with God. So if you're struggling with this, I encourage you to consider reading some of the chapters from the back. Just pick one. Pick the one that you identify with the most. There's acceptance was the answer. It used to be called Dr. Alcoholic Addict. Maybe you're a doctor and you have a cocaine problem, or you're an anesthesiologist and you have access to those anesthetics and stuff, and you're here or you want to listen for that stuff. Well, then go to that. Go to acceptance was the answer, and you'll see some drug stuff in there. Maybe you're a Native American woman, and you want to read what a Native American woman says, or whatever. Just skim through the index, and you'll find somebody who you might be able to identify with a little bit better than me, and read their story and check it out. And if it doesn't quite jive with you, check another one out. But just keep going. Just keep looking, and some things will fall into place. I promise you. It always does. All you got to do is just turn some stones over and you'll find what you're looking for. It says, these give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what has actually happened in their lives. Now, before I move on, I also want to say I'm not going to go into a whole lot of content, at least as far as through the big book, when it comes to stories. I'm not going to read stories on here. There are some very popular passages in which I'm going to make some commentary for, and I'm going to have some guest speakers and stuff like that where we'll talk about, like I just said, the Dr. Alcoholic Addict, now in the 4th edition known as Acceptance Was the Answer, Dr. Paul O. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about some of those concepts, but otherwise, they're all just stories. They don't have to do with the first 164, so we're not going to mess with that. But that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of great content in there. I love the stories. I don't read them very often, to be honest with you. At this point in my sobriety, I did in early days. The whole big book was kind of equal to me. There was no page that was any better than others. Today, I definitely have highlights galore of things that are almost like, big book scripture, if you will, that I and a lot of the old timers kind of live by. But nonetheless, go explore them anyway. Even if you've got God all figured out, there's some of them are really interesting, and it helps to read stories from other people. So then it says, we hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages and will believe that it's only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, yes, I'm one of them too. I must have this thing. And when I say fully disclosing ourselves and our problems, it has to do with alcoholism. It's not about like just coming into a meeting and just dumping about how bad my day was and what all these people didn't do that I expected them to do when I was playing God and blah, 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 and all this woe is me stuff. We're talking about fully disclosing ourselves and our problems. Maybe I got drunk and woke up with my best friend's girlfriend. Maybe that strikes a chord with you. Or maybe I woke up and when I say woke up, I kind of mean coming out of a blackout. I wake up from a blackout and suddenly I'm in my car. My dog's in my front seat, and I put the car in drive and it won't go. Well, I look out the car and it looks like I've hit somebody and hit another vehicle, and I've smashed into it, and I've destroyed my car enough to where it won't drive anymore. That's a problem. Those are things that all happened to me, and you may not identify with either of those, but it's by saying these things where you're like, wow, that guy, he something similar. Well, it didn't exactly happen like that. It might have been my sister's friend or blah, 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 or you know what I'm saying? But these are pretty unique to us. Most people are like, that's crazy. Why? How could that ever happen? Why would you do something like that to your best friend? Well, I didn't. I was at a show having a good time, and suddenly I wake up and there I am. No idea any of that stuff happened. It was horrible. So that's what I mean by that, is these stories of having war stories, if you will, having to do with alcoholism and some of the problems that alcoholism has caused us in our lives. Sharing these things are really helpful for people to identify with. So whenever you're speaking in a meeting, these are really helpful things to share, not just to help you feel better, because it does have some therapeutic benefit, but also, and more importantly, to help the X number of other people that are there, because it'll help them to identify with you, and it's just this positive feedback cycle where everybody starts to benefit from it and get better. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So that was a lot of content. There's a Solution, has a lot of content in it, but I hope you learned something, and I hope that this was helpful. If you have any questions, you're always welcome to email me at drbenaa@gmail.com, and we can talk about something. But more importantly, I'd encourage you to go to local AA meetings near you and find a local sponsor and ask them questions. If you're still struggling with this God stuff, ask them questions. Ask other people questions. Read more books. Seek out more information. But I am always here to help. And I'm not the most prompt with my email account, but I will get back to you. So by all means, feel free to email me any questions you have. And otherwise, I will see you in the next chapter, which is titled All About Alcoholism. See you there.